Hello and welcome to this extra episode of the Keyboard Chronicles. Decided to call it our end-of-year extravaganza, just off the cuff totally. How original is that? I'm your host, David Holloway, and it's always good to be here with you. I'll firstly go to my common brother-in-arms, Mr. Paul Bindig. How are you, sir?
Mate, as always, I'm thrilled to be here, David. I'm excited. End of year show. How cool.
And when I say common, I don't mean you are common. I mean my regular. That's the word I meant to use. Regular brother-in-arms.
Well, I'm pretty common as well, so it's all good.
Well, Paul and I are both commoners compared to Mr. Dewi Evans, who joins us tonight. Now, it's a thrill to introduce Dewi. As you'll hear at the end of the show, we've just recently done a brief interview with Dewi about some of his interesting writings earlier in his career. And Dewi, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. It's a real honour to be a guest. Thanks.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of you, the podcast, and you guys. And as I was saying beforehand, it's a bit surreal actually sitting here talking to you.
It's wonderful to have you here. And Dewi, you're obviously from the wonderful country of Wales, so It's great to have you here, and I wish I'd been to Wales more often, but I have to be honest and say I was in Cardiff in 1997.
Wow!
The last time I was in Wales. It's been a while.
A lovely city, and it's very wet and windy here today because we're I think winter officially started yesterday.
Yes.
So I don't know what the weather's like in Australia.
Well, I think you can guess by the fact that we're both, Paul and I, wearing T-shirts. Yeah. So, it's been swelteringly hot here. So it was over 30 degrees Celsius here today. Paul, you would have been similar, I'm guessing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been hot here and sort of wet too, hot and wet.
Yes.
Been raining a lot, but very, very, very warm. So, Dewi, I have to confess I've never been to Wales. But my wife and I are planning our second ever trip to that part of the world in a couple of years' time. So can you tell me why I should visit Wales? Because I need to convince her to put Wales on the tour. So what will we see at Wales?
Well, Wales it's quite a small country, but there's quite a lot packed into it. So you've got some stunning scenery. You've got stunning coastline. But also you've got the Snowdonia mountain range and mountain ranges down in the south of Wales too. I'm in the north. I'm in the very northwest of Wales on an island called Anglesey, or Ynys Môn in Cymraeg, as we say. And gets very wet and windy here. But when the sun is shining, it is absolutely stunning. So it's a great place to visit if you want a variety of different landscapes, very friendly people. Cardiff is an amazing city. Cardiff is actually quite a long way from where I am. It's probably quicker for me to get to London than it is to Cardiff because the transport links aren't great, but fantastic city as well. So a lot to recommend it. And if you do come, cool. Give me a message, and it'd be nice to meet up. If possible.
Sure.
So that's Dewi's way of saying you can stay for a month free board, Paul. It's all nice. Locked in. Yeah, excellent.
There is just one thing I want. It's a bit of a shameless plug for the village I grew up in. You might have heard of the famous village with the long name in Wales.
Yeah, I was really going to ask that, Dewi, and I thought, no, I won't be stereotypical and ask that.
That's actually where I grew up, bizarrely enough. And it's about 20 miles from where I live now. I live in Holyhead. Wow. Holyhead is like one of the main ports to Ireland from the UK. But yeah, I grew up in, would you like me to say it?
Yes, please.
Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll go Gerich Windrobwyll Llantysilio go. So.
That alone, it's a pleasure having you, but that alone has made my year. That's brilliant. Thank you.
That's the best thing I've ever heard. That's so cool.
Oh, you're welcome. I believe there's a town in Australia with a very long name as well, or have I got that wrong?
No, there is. I'm just trying to think which one it'd be. Probably somewhere in Western Australia, but you're right. Not as long as that, though, but there is a very long named town. I just can't think of what it's called. I don't think... Yeah, Woolloomooloo counts in Sydney. So, no, great to have you here. So I thought we'd and sorry, just for the sake of our audience, so Dewi's obviously a keyboard player as well. That goes without saying. So what I thought we'd kick off as far as a topic for an end-of-year discussion is, it might be because, we're so immersed in this area, but I feel like 2024 was one of the best years for new releases of keyboards that I've seen in a number of years, at least since COVID, I would have thought, but I would have thought in the last 4 or 5 years.
I would say, the last 2 or 3 years have been pretty busy. There's been some very interesting new stuff. I think one of the highlights of the kind of synth year, if you like, was it the Moog Muse? Muse?
Yeah, the Muse. Yeah,
Muse.
it's funny you say.
Can't get my
it's funny you say that. I was thinking of that one as well. Yeah, so tell us about that. I've been so tempted if I had the money to buy one of those.
Well, it seems like an incredibly capable synth. I know it's expensive, but it doesn't seem that unreasonable. I think it's about £3,000, if I remember right, in the UK. But haven't actually kind of set eyes on it in the flesh, kind of thing. But I've watched some great demos on YouTube, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, Moog themselves, I mean, they've had a huge few years, but I think that's probably the flagship release for them. But I mean, I apologise. I haven't done a huge amount of research on this topic, just anecdotally thinking around the past year. But I mean, every single manufacturer, or particularly the big half dozen, have all had fairly major releases. Roland have certainly been busy. Akai have been busy.
Yeah.
Korg's released some stuff. Yamaha, did I just say Yamaha? But I mean, the Montage M series, I'm just trying to think, was that earlier this year or very late last year?
I reckon it was probably last year, although it seems more recently than that. But the other one that springs to mind as something quite not unique as well. It's something a bit different. Is the Arturia Astrolab?
Oh yes. Arturia had a huge year. Actually, that's a great point. Have you laid hands on an Astrolab, Dewi? Because I've been very tempted. But I'm told, well, from what anecdotally I'm hearing, it's probably not the best keyboard for live work. So as far as, because there is that slight delay in loading sounds and plugins, but I haven't tested it, so that could actually be quite incorrect. And welcome back, Paul. So that was another big. What I started to ask you, Paul, was, and Dewi's just given two great examples. I said, I know you're not a big gearhead, but are there any standouts for you this year of whether it was a busier year and anything that even your cynical self was tempted by?
Thanks. And I had a bit of an internet drop out there. I just got completely booted out of the system and came back. Dewi was just saying before how pleased he is to be with us. He's now seeing the real seedy, unprofessional underbelly of what actually goes on here as we have internet dropouts and all these sorts of things. And
I thought I was the only one having problems today, but it's boring to see.
This is modern living, I think. So I'm not so sure about that. But look, you're right, David. I'm not a massive gearhead, and I don't get too caught up in new keyboards and all the rest of it. I've been enjoying learning my which is not a 2024 keyboard, but how to use my Nautilus properly, which I got just over a year ago, and that was thanks to you bullying me into buying it, David. So, but I have to thank you for that, because it has actually been a life changing experience.
It has.
It's been really good, but yeah, I think MIDI controllers seem to be the new hot item at the moment. And I think I might have just caught Dewi talking about one as I came back into the fold here. But what's interesting to me is how it seems to me that many people are moving away from hardware keyboards and into a MIDI keyboard with VSTs and this sort of thing. And I don't know whether that's just my perception, but that really seems to be what's happening.
No, I think you're right.
And I understand the reasons why. I mean, you can get so many great sounds if you're moving around, traveling like I do a lot. It's not that I do it, but it would be a lot easier just to travel with a laptop and and you could hire a MIDI controller and go from there. So nothing specific, David, if I'm honest.
No, that's great. And I mean, the standouts for me, I suppose, as you know, Paul, I tend to buy and sell the odd keyboard, not for profit, but I tend to experiment if I don't lay hands on things, and I take the odd gamble. And I mean, the two that I bought this year, one was the Arturia, not the Astrolab, but the Keylab 61 Mark III. So I've had a Mark II that I use in my band and have so for a number of years, and I bought the Mark III, and it's a beautiful piece of gear. I love those MIDI controllers. They're solid as a rock. They feel substantial. They're actually quite weighty for a MIDI controller. Love them to bits. The other one that I've bought, and I'm not having buyer's remorse, I've just realised it's probably not for me, and my situation is I did buy a Nord Electro 6D. I'm not going to talk names, but I bought it off a really well-known international artist who listed it for sale. They needed to sell it relatively urgently. I did put in a bid for it and was successful. I've got it home. And realised that the weighted piano keys and the Nord Electro sound set, which for those a lot will be aware is mostly electric pianos, which obviously a weighted piano keyboard's great for. Not so much for all the organs and stuff. And the reality is, in my bands, I do a fair bit of organ and not a lot of piano. So I've realised I probably was a bit hasty buying that. So that's just a veiled way of saying I've got it for sale if anyone's interested, and I'm happy to tell a legitimate interested buyer who they're buying it. Well, what would you call it? The heritage or the pedigree of the keyboard. It's only been gigged with 3 or 4 times. It's in mint condition, and I'm certainly probably unlikely to gig with it. So anyway, if you're Australia based and you want a Nord Electro 6D. Yes,
I think I saw your ad on Facebook.
Yes,
and it's the HP keybed on that.
It is, yeah.
Because I've got the same keybed. I got an old Nord Stage 2 with that same keybed, and I do like it for piano, but as you were saying, for organ, it's a bit
for
tricky.
Organ, it's not ideal. Yeah, and I used to own a Nord Electro 5D and loved it with the waterfall keys, and I should never have sold it. But anyway, so yeah, it's been a big year for keyboards, and it's hard to see 2025 having as many shake-up announcements, although the rumours are that, Paul, in your field of play, the rumours for a Kronos 3 seem to be growing. So that's going to be really interesting if they do announce that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it is interesting because I assumed they weren't going to go down that road, particularly when they decided they were going to release a Nautilus with Aftertouch, and you could also get your Nautilus retrofitted with Aftertouch. And I thought, right, that must be them deciding that's the new flagship keyboard, although we know it's not doesn't quite have the functionality of a Kronos, but it's pretty darn close. But yeah, maybe that's what they're going to go with. I find that sort of thing very interesting. It would be lovely to know the marketing strategies and what drives them and the sales number that causes these decisions. It'd be fascinating, I think, to understand that. But getting back to your Nord, David, I saw you were selling it as well. I think I was like Dewi. I saw it on Facebook and went, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I know who that used to belong to too. So let me tell you, someone very well known has had their fingers on that keyboard and very capable too. So
yes, very capable. And as you can imagine, they are Australia-based, and to their huge credit as a modest musician, I know someone did ask them when they listed it for sale, would they autograph it? And to their credit, they said, I would not want to devalue it by autographing it, which is very modest because but I wasn't about to ask him.
Will you autograph it, David, when you sell it?
You definitely don't want to devalue. That's a way to knock $1,000 off it before it leaves the door.
Hey, Dewi, can I ask you a question, Dewi?
Course, yeah.
Because I didn't really have the benefit of meeting you earlier, so I'm catching up here. We're talking about keyboards and what we've enjoyed coming out this year. What's currently your favourite piece of equipment you're using?
Do you know, it's actually when you're comparing it to things like Nords and Kronoses, it's actually quite a bargain basement keyboard, but I love it. It's something. It's the Yamaha CK61.
Oh yeah.
Which I bought, I think, just after Christmas in January, and I bought it because I'd read so many good reviews about it. But I thought it would be a good backup keyboard to my Nord, which is has been my main kind of gigging keyboard for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. But I was just totally knocked out how useful this little keyboard is. And I paid, in the UK, I paid around £700 for it.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous. Yeah. And it's pretty much, I know I've got an older generation Nord stage, I'm two generations behind, but it's all, I would say it's pretty much as capable as my stage 2. And in a lot of ways, it surpasses it in terms of the features it's got. And
it's super lightweight too, Dewi, isn't it? I mean, I've been tempted a few times with the CKs because I own a Moginie X and I used to own a YC that I also sold this year. And yeah, I've heard the CKs are wonderful and really lightweight.
But it's got to the point now where I'm actually using it as my gigging keyboard because it's just such a handy size to start with. And the weight, it just weighs nothing. And but it's just like, the only way I can describe it's like a sort of Swiss Army knife keyboard. It's got so many useful features. It's got built-in speakers, but they're not obvious. So they're kind of like underneath the keyboard, and it's got things like Bluetooth, so you can sort of play your, when you're practicing, you play like backing tracks through the speakers by Bluetooth, and another really useful feature it's got is like the ability to play WAV files. So you can assign a WAV file for each sort of live program, if you like. And that's such a useful little feature, just for triggering like little keyboard parts or little sound effects or little drum loops. My band do Enola Gay by Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. And it's got that very distinctive kind of old school Roland drum machine loop going throughout the song. But just to have that at the beginning of the song, just really, and it's so easy just to press the bottom key on the keyboard and have that going at the beginning of the song, and then everybody recognizes it. And
that's right.
So it's the first time I've actually ever owned a Yamaha keyboard, but I've been seriously impressed by it. And
so I'm now tempted again. And just aside from pronouncing the name of your hometown, you've made my year twice by mentioning Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. I'm a major fan, and
me too.
Dewi, I know they play the UK regularly, but I'm a bucket list moment for me early next year is when they finally, after one aborted attempt, tour Australia, and so I'm actually getting to see them for the very first time. I've been waiting since I was 16 years old, and that's a long time ago to see OMD live, so I'm very excited.
I've seen them, I think, twice. Once in the very early days when they were promoting, I think it was Dazzle Ships back in the 80s. And then more recently, they did a gig in Hammersmith, the old Hammersmith Odeon in London. And they were actually recording a live DVD that night, and they were playing. They played the whole of the Architecture and Morality album. That night.
There you go.
So that was a highlight. So they are really, really great live band.
Amazing keyboard synth-driven band. And Paul Humphreys, answer your emails, man. I want to talk to you.
Yes.
So no, that's great. Thank you, Dewi, for that. The CK, definitely on the bucket list. So big year for that. I thought we might also delve into, and I know we did this, Paul, last year, and we'll all play a bit of guessing, but I thought I'd go through what actually were the episodes that were of most interest to both viewers and listeners. So as most people know, most people are listening to us on podcast platforms. There's also a ever-growing proportion that are watching/listening on YouTube. So I thought, I like last year, would divide up into the video views and the podcasting platform views, which I get good metrics on. So, and what's really interesting is there's a bit of overlap, but there's also, and Paul, you can't be guessing too much because you know what these are, but hopefully some of them might be a bit of a surprise to you, Dewi. So, I thought I'd start with the most viewed episodes, and these are ones released this year. As you can imagine, as interviews sit on YouTube for a year, 2-3 years, they grow in views. So I'm purely talking about episodes that were released this year and what have been the most popular. Even in that, using that metric, obviously ones that were were released at the start of the year are more likely to have more views, but it's still a better measure. So the fifth most viewed one, so we're talking about videos at this stage, is Mr. Jamie Hillbolt, who plays keyboards with Gary Puckett in the Union Gap. Amazing artist, and Jamie, it was lovely to speak with him on his career. So yeah, he came in as the fifth most viewed video of the year. So good stuff, Jamie. And I don't think I'm talking out of school too much to say that I'm looking forward to catching up with Jamie. Gary Puckett and the Union Gap are touring Australia next year, and Jamie and I are catching up and hopefully doing a retour depending on the venue requirements on the night.
You're travelling a few kilometres to get to him too, aren't you, David? Is that right?
I am. I won't bore people with too much, but essentially I'm travelling about, where are we? About 450 kilometres to go and see Jamie and Gary Puckett. So, but it'll be a trip well worth making. Only because
look, to our viewers not from Australia, if you live in Australia, that's just a pop down the road, 450 kilometres.
It's like driving from, I don't know, Dewi, from in the UK, it'd be like driving from London to Inverness probably, or actually probably even more. But yeah, it's a fair drive, but
maybe like Mullins to Cardiff.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Not quite as far, but...
And it's not because they're not playing the major cities. It's just I'm in the pleasant situation of either, I think the OMD gig actually may be clashing with one of the dates in Sydney, and the other one is I'm actually playing a gig, so I wasn't able to catch up with Jamie while I was in Sydney. So anyway, so that's Jamie came in at number 5. Now, number 4 was a two-parter, and I haven't actually I haven't added up any two-parters into one viewership. I've just taken the one that had the most views, and that's Mr. Larry Mullins. So Larry is the keyboard player and drummer with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and also with Iggy Pop for many years, well over a decade. I'll talk more about that later, but yeah, Larry came in at number 4. Are you seeing the pattern here, Paul? You've not been on one of these yet. I know you were there for Jamie, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. No,
you wasn't. No, you weren't.
No. I look, I've never really had too many illusions about the value I add to this podcast, and but if I did have any illusions, they are being very quickly shattered. But that's okay. I've got
not at all.
It's all good.
I can honestly say the best ones are the ones where you're here. So I know you were on this one. So the third most viewed one is Mr. Thomas Dolby, which was obviously a bucket list moment for both you and I, Paul. And I know, Dewi, you're a fan as well. So yeah, it was amazing. And I think Thomas's interview is going to be one of those ones that will just, have a lot of views over a long time, because he did. You can tell he's a deep thinker. Great guy. Number 2, I can't remember, Paul. I feel bad with you on this one. Number 2, you weren't. No, you weren't. There you go. I can't quite remember whether you're there or not. Is Mr. Mikey Rose, so who obviously played keyboards with Oasis, and more recently with Noel Gallagher and the High Flying Birds. I can honestly say Mikey's views aren't just because of the Oasis reunion announcement. Most of them occurred before that, but I actually haven't. I don't know whether you've heard anything, Dewi. I have Oasis announced who the band will actually be supporting Noel and Liam when they, is it the original Oasis?
All I know is it's Noel and Liam. I don't know.
Yeah, that's all they've announced. Yeah, it's been a couple of months since I googled, but I wasn't able to find any details. It's amazing to announce an Oasis reunion when there were obviously other well-known members of the band, and Mikey came in later and wasn't one of the originals.
Yeah,
but it's bizarre.
I've got this theory that they're going to fall out. The dates have been announced so far in advance that they're going to fall out again before they actually, get round to playing live. But I might be wrong.
I obviously don't know this for a fact, but I can imagine the legal agreements that are in place to ensure those gigs happen are huge. I reckon the penalties in them would be multi-million dollars.
Yeah.
So that was Mikey, and Mikey was an absolute pleasure to speak with. Just, again, so much knowledge and so much perspective on a great career. And number 1... on the video, and it's interesting, she doesn't appear at all in the audio one, not because, she had plenty of listens, but not in the top 5, was the amazing Anna Lapwood. So, Dewi, have you run across Anna before?
I haven't, to be honest, no.
So Anna is the director of music at Pembroke College at Cambridge, and during COVID, I think it was, got huge positive notoriety on TikTok and so on for posting some organ playing she'd done, some of the songs from Interstellar and other stuff, and got an enormous social media following. And catching up with Anna, I think it was around February this year, was amazing. She was so generous with her time and had this amazing perspective on just fostering young people in music. Her own background as both an organist and conductor. She's had an enormous year. She, for those of our listeners and viewers that haven't watched or heard her interview, it is well and worth. God, I'm stumbling over my words tonight. Well worth listening to. Because she does amazing things, like goes to Royal Albert Hall, Dewi, which I know you will know well, and I had the pleasure of, just as a tourist, checking it out a few months back. She goes in there like at 11 o'clock midnight at night and does 8 hours of practice all night on the organ there at Royal Albert Hall, which is I think it's one of the 5 biggest organs in the world. I know she talks about that in the podcast. The US hold the record for the top 2 biggest organs in the world, but I know Royal Albert Hall's right up there. Just an amazing person. She does amazing mentoring of students in Africa, all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, highly recommend. So Anna Lapwood, not surprisingly, given her touring and everything this year, has had a huge response.
I'm definitely going to get round to hearing that, because I came to the podcast, I wasn't quite sure how long it'd been running when I first started listening to it, but I've actually been methodically working my way through all the episodes from episode 1 to kind of
oh wow,
and I'm kind of up to the last one. I had heard some of them before, people that I'd kind of heard of and were fans of, but I think I'm up to the lady that was in the Decemberists.
Yes. Jenny Connolly Drizos. Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, Jenny was great. Yeah,
and I have to say that song you said brought a tear to your eye. I did watch that video, and it's stunning. It's a great song, great video,
absolutely amazing. Jenny's an absolute star, and deserves a lot more recognition than what she got. So so they were. Any comments on those 5, Paul? Any surprises there for you?
Look, my big comment is, I'm just going to reinforce what you said about Anna Lapwood, the most popular YouTube one, and I wasn't part of that episode, but I have watched it. I watched them all. In fact, I'm more likely to watch the ones I haven't been in than the ones that I have been in, because I'm really interested to, I've obviously heard it if I've been part of the interview, but I'm always interested to hear what you chat to the guests about that I don't get to hang out with. And she's just an amazing person. It's probably the best way I can describe her. And a smile that lights up the screen, and you just get energy from listening to her talk and discuss her career. So for all of our listeners, viewers who haven't seen that episode, please go join everyone else and go check it out. It's really worth it. Or if you like Dewi and you're working your way through, that's a real highlight for you when you get to it. No doubt.
Absolutely.
About it.
Look forward to that.
Yeah. I think you'll love it, mate. I really do. But I'm not surprised. Again, the Thomas Dolby interview was a real highlight for me, which I'll discuss a bit later. But all of those guests were wonderful, and you did a great job, David, and we learned a lot about them, which is what this is all about, getting to know about them and their perspectives on keyboard. So I'm not falling off my chair with shock at any of those.
No, that's right. And just for those that follow stats, so we actually had 29 guests and 31 episodes this year, which I haven't compared to previous years, but I think would be slightly up. It feels like I'm editing more than ever, so I'm assuming that's the highest release in a single year since we started in November 2019. I think the maths would bear that up, but I haven't actually done the calculations.
Hey, speaking of starting in 2019, I was pulling on this shirt today. This isn't a plug. Well, actually, it is a plug. So I was pulling on this shirt today.
Buy one.
And it says here, established 2019, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, really? Did we start doing this that long ago? I can't. Where's the time gone, David?
I know. I think we started November 2019. And then I was about to say to Dewi, well, I hope you listened to episode 6. It's the best of the whole 130 something, which was Paul's interview.
I did. Because I listened to that one before we last, spoke about the book, and I did have a couple of questions, but I can't. Did I write them down? What's the name of your kind of not your Pink Floyd tribute, but your sort of other covers band?
This is the best. And I just want to jump in before Paul answers. This is arguably one of the best band names, particularly from an Australian, although I'd argue in a UK perspective as well. Go.
I don't know if it's the best band name at all. I think it's the worst. Finger Bun.
Finger Bun, that's it.
Big Bun, which I don't think. I think these are only in Australia, aren't they, David? So
I'm just trying to think. What I think, in the UK, Dewey. So just buns with the pink coconut icing on top.
Oh, is it pink? Yeah. Well, I know the ones we've got ones with white icing, which
white too. It can be white.
Okay, right. So it's not just an Australian thing. Very good. Yeah. So we're called Finger Bun, and we get asked all the time why, where, how did this name come about? And people sometimes think it's a little bit of an allusion to something a bit dirty or whatever. It absolutely isn't. It was just like we were trying to name the band, and naming a band, and you gentlemen will both know this. Naming a band is like naming children. It's very hard to do. But naming children's hard because mum and dad can't agree. Well, when the band's got 4, 5, 6 members, it's like 3 times as hard to come up with something. And we were trying to name the band, and we were sick of having the discussion. And someone said, I believe it may have even been me, said, I don't really care what we call this X bleep 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 band. Just let's give it a name. The next person to say something, that's what it's been called. And Brad, our bassist, said Finger Bun. So there it is. That's what the band's been called.
Love it.
So ridiculous, but there you go. It's memorable. I suppose that's the good thing.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think in the UK we generally call them iced buns,
that would be right.
Iced fingers.
There you go, iced fingers.
Yeah. Do they have them with fruit in the UK, like little raisins and things in there? Because that's a thing here.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. And they are very nice. I have to say,
the iced fingers. The Ice Fingers is a good name for a band, Paul. Maybe it's time for change.
Fingers, yeah. Maybe if we have a spin-off band or we have a split, a schism, one can be the Iced Fingers.
Gold. Yeah, so there you go. And then, so while we're doing stats, and the other thing, Derry, I'm not sure if you're a cricket tragic, but Paul and I are. So the whole statistics thing appeals to the cricketing fan in me. So as far as the listen to episodes, the top 5, and I've mentioned many times in the podcast that probably 70 to 80% of our audience is listening rather than viewing. But as I said, that is changing fairly rapidly with YouTube, thankfully. Well, not thankfully. We love our audio listeners, and we definitely tailor the podcast as much as possible to audio as much as video, if not more. So the top 5. So the 5th most listened to episode during 2024 was Mr. Bob Fridzema, who is the keyboard player with Glenn Hughes, amongst many other things. Bob came in at number 5, and he was... I'm trying to think, Paul. You weren't on that one either, were you?
Not on that one either. No.
Oh, that's funny.
Just so everyone knows, this is not because David and I have had a falling out and he doesn't invite me. Well, maybe it is that. Maybe he's. I've been very, very busy this year, and which is a good thing. So my tribute band has been really, really busy, and like this podcast, it's getting busier. So sometimes I can't be there, and I always say to David, don't make our valued guests, who are all notable keyboard players, don't make them change their schedule because of me. I'm happy to work around, and if I can't be there, well, bad luck for me. And
that's right.
It gives me something to listen to when I'm hanging out on tour and listening to the podcast. So it's really cool.
How many? Because I don't know whether you counted them up. You did more than 40 gigs this year with the Pink Floyd tribute?
Oh, a few less than that. It was between 30 and 40. And
40, yeah.
Next year's going to be the same. We're probably going to push towards 40. We're adding gigs every week. It's a good thing, and so it's what we want to do. But it just means sometimes we don't get to do some other fun things like this. That's all.
That's right. And the one you definitely involved in was, we've already talked about, was at the 4th most listened to was Thomas Dolby. So I'll skip over that because we're going to talk more about that. And number 3 was Mikey Rowe that we've already talked about. Now, the number 2 and number 1 didn't surprise me as far as the quality of the guests, because they're both absolutely amazing. But Anna Lapwood is the other example that in the traditional band-based keyboard playing world, these guys may not be as well known as some names that we have on, but I find that they are the people that our audience likes the most in some respects, and these two are no exception. So the second most listened to episode of 2024 was Mr. Jim Sheridan, who is from Ireland and has this amazing career in television as a band leader. And he's just a generally brilliant guy all round. And I know for a fact you were involved in that one, Paul. So it was, I mean, Jim was just a damn fun chat.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to talk about that as well later. So Jim came in at number 2.
Am I
and
allowed
then
to
number
say now that
yeah, please. Actually, I'd be interested in your thoughts. Yeah.
one of my top.
Well, I've got a number 1. Or are you going to talk about Jim?
Jim was one of my top 3. I love that podcast, and I learned so much. Really, really lovely guy, and it's such an interesting conversation as well. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah.
Were you familiar, Dewi, with his TV show?
No, not at all. No.
I thought you might have been back from that part of the world because obviously in Australia we weren't as aware of it down here, but I know it was massive.
In Ireland in particular, but across the UK. Yeah.
Geographically, we are quite near. We've got the Irish Sea between us, but like I said before, Holyhead is one of the main ports to Dublin. But we don't really see Irish TV over here.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
No, that's great. And number 1 has, again, for the same reason, brilliant guess, and just shows you that his breadth of experience and perhaps his life as on both sides of the fence as a musician and also as a purveyor of musical instruments is Mr. Damon McMahon. So for those that don't recall, Damon is an Australian-based musician who spent many years in Asia. I feel really bad now. Was it Roland? Definitely Roland, and I think Yamaha at some stage. I apologise if I've got that wrong, Damon, when you're listening to this.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
But it had some amazing insights into the life of, working within the musical instrument industry in the China, Hong Kong, as part of China, and also in Japan. It was absolutely fascinating. And that's one of the reasons I think listeners have loved it, and he's been listened to by a lot of people. So Damon, I'm going to ping you on Facebook once we've got this ready to go, and hopefully you're pleased with that, deservedly so. So yeah, they're the top 5 for 2024. So I thought we might do honourable mentions. Paul, I'll start with you. I know you've got a few there, and just your thoughts on them and so on.
Yeah, so so this is like my personal top 5, and I limited it to ones that I was involved in terms of had the chat and just enjoying getting to know the players. So I had to have Thomas Dolby in there, who what a legend he is. Now he's just fun to talk to. He's the real definition of a polymath. He's just he's writing books, and he's just such an artist, and he's I love his creative thought process, and I just found him to be a really interesting guy. And I told that story on the podcast about how when I was telling my kids that we were going to be interviewing him, I thought they'd be going, "Oh yeah, who's this bloke?" And I said, "Look, he's a really big deal if you're an old dude like me." And then I played them Blinded Me with Science, and they both went, "Oh yeah, this is a cool song," because it was in a video game that they played, which I had no idea. So it just shows you, good music is immortal, which I thought was a really cool thing. I also had in there Felix Bornholdt. And I really liked that episode because Felix was not playing for necessarily a legacy artist like many of our guests do, but he was playing for L'Homme Cordial, who are a really hot band from Australia. And again, amongst people who are sort of Gen Z, I know both I think your daughter and my kids are big into that band. So I really enjoyed hearing his perspective. And what I loved hearing about is how he was saying contrasting touring in Australia versus touring, say, in Europe, and how much harder it is to do in Australia. And I just learned a lot from that perspective.
And Paul, can I open the curtain again for our audience on that one? And I felt sorry for Felix. Not whilst he was talking to us, but in the preceding just couple of days before he jumped on that podcast, he knew that he was leaving L'Homme Cordial, but he wasn't able to say anything until the official announcement. So he was hugely apologetic at the end of the interview, saying, "I'm so sorry, but I'm leaving Lime Cordiale," and it's all amicable. He's decided to do his job. There's no issue there. So it was an interesting one for us
So true.
because, So anyway, just a little bit of an anecdote there.
Yeah, but no, he was awesome, and as you say, there's no issues there. He was just pursuing other musical interests and what have you. So then I've got Dennis Atlas, and I love Dennis for a few reasons. One, his energy. Wow, what a positive and energetic guy. He's the keyboard player for Toto, but what I also really loved about him is he is not only a keyboard player for Toto, but he plays in like tribute bands and cover bands and that sort of thing as well, like a lot of us do. And he had just a really cool perspective, and it was just really interesting to hear what he had to say. And then I've thrown in Larry Goldings, who is just a legend. And it was just a privilege and honour to have him on the show, as he is all our guests. But it was, he's got a storied musical history, and it was nice we got to talk about Hans Greuner for a little while as well, which was very cool. So that was like getting two guests for the price of one, almost. And I had Jim Sheridan as well. So like you, Dewi, I really enjoyed the Jim Sheridan episode. And David and I have the pleasure of knowing Jim maybe a little bit more intimately because he's a co-moderator on the Keyboard Players and Covers Bands Facebook group that we're all a part of. And he's just a champion bloke. He's just such how he comes across in that interview as being a really good fella that's exactly what he's like. So it was just nice to sort of, as much as you can call someone who's never met physically a friend, I sort of feel like he's a mate, and it was nice to have that chat. So they were my notable episodes, but I'm fascinated, Dewi, if David doesn't mind me taking over his smooth hosting duties. Tell me about your experiences. What were the episodes that you enjoyed listening to most? Yeah, and I'm happy to accept the fact that you are doing a bit of working through the back catalogue. So even if it's an older episode, but you listened to it this year, I think that still qualifies.
Well, yeah. I mean, I am. I'm kind of like listening to the newer ones, and also, so I'm kind of at some point I'm going to meet in the middle, I think. But so I have heard quite a few of the more recent ones too. This year, and I've got a few highlights. Jim Sheridan, we've already mentioned. Really interesting. I was so interested to hear his sort of backstory, and how he got to be where he is today. It's such an interesting story, and one I'm sure a lot of people could relate to. That kind of almost like intruder syndrome. But just being in the right place at the right time and having the gift of the gab, and it's great. Thomas Dolby was such a. I was so pleased when I saw you were going to be interviewing him, because he's been a hero of mine for so many years now. Since I first saw him on the TV back in probably about 1981, and the Golden Age of Wireless is one of my top 5 Desert Island discs, if you like. Such a great album, and I've actually got a little story about the recent Thomas Dolby gig, because I saw him in
Please, yeah.
In when was it? I think it was July or August this year. So he's doing a tour. He was doing some dates in Europe, and quite a few in the UK. And it's quite a rarity for him to tour these days. So so I went to see him in Manchester, and it was quite interesting, because I remember in the podcast he was talking about his sort of backup system, his computer.
Yeah.
How if one goes down, the other one kind of kicks in automatically. And of course, when I went to see him, at the end of the second song, everything went dead, But if there was a backup in place, it didn't work, unfortunately. So he had to.
Oh, wow.
He had to leave. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this if he's.
No, I'm sure he doesn't.
If he's listening or watching, but it was quite nicely done. He kind of admitted, "Oh, there's a technical issue. I'm just going to let my guys deal with this, and I'll be back in a few minutes." And sure enough, he was back in about 10 minutes. But it reminded me of what he'd said in the podcast, and I thought, "Oh, I wonder what happened there." Maybe it wasn't an issue with the sound laptop because he had a video running as well. I think the second laptop was running the video, if I remember right, what he said on the podcast.
That rings a bell, yeah.
But if the music one went down, the video one would kick in automatically. But yeah, it's just a fantastic gig otherwise, just a thrill to see him. He's playing on his own, totally solo.
Yes.
But playing a lot of deep cuts, not his most obvious. Well, he did play the obvious, hits as well, but a lot of deep cuts, and such a thrill. I think I've seen him maybe 3 times over the years, and
If I could just jump in there, Dewey, too.
Yeah.
I think that what story you just told, I think that brings back a key point that a lot of our guests will make, and I think that all of us who play live should do well to remember, which if something catastrophic does happen, which clearly it did to Thomas at that particular gig you went to, whilst it's not desirable, it's part of the live experience. And, you as an audience member didn't go, oh, this is terrible, I want my money back. You went, oh, okay, this is quite interesting. And as you said, he handled it really well, and they got up and running again, and away we went. And it was still a wonderful gig, and you really enjoyed it. And, from an audience perspective, all they want to see is some great live music, and that is sometimes part of the live experience.
Yeah.
Things do go wrong, and how we handle those moments really speaks volumes about
That's
us.
right.
It sounds like he handled it like the champion bloke that he seems to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there was such a warm feeling from the audience as well. They kind of, perhaps, the majority would kind of expect there to be some kind of technical issues, with that kind of gig, because it's very, very synth-based, very technology-based. And just one more thing, he started with an absolutely stunning version of Blue Monday by New Order.
Ah.
Which was really unexpected. And I was wondering if he was just doing that in Manchester because of the Manchester connection. But
Yeah,
I think
true.
I think he was doing it throughout the tour. But it was so atmospheric. And if there's any, I don't know if there's any clips on YouTube, it's really, really worth watching that because it was really good, really good.
There you go.
But yeah, going back to the podcasts, I've got a little list here. I really enjoyed Doug Petty, the Tears for Fears keyboard player. That was really interesting. I was intrigued by what he said about his backup strategy of, covering a gig with if you've got an organ sound and the piano sound, you can cover a gig. And that's kind of stuck in my head. And I'm thinking, would I be able to do that, with the songs we play in my band, But, might be worth, if it ever happens, it might be a good experiment. I don't know about you guys. Would you be able to survive just with an organ and a piano sound?
Probably not.
It probably depend a bit on it. I think I answered someone's question the other day about this in the Keyboard Players Facebook group. But I think sometimes, I hate to say this, but I think sometimes as keyboard players we overestimate how much people actually listen to what we do.
Yeah.
So I feel like we all probably could cover a lot of things with a keyboard and an organ sound, even though it might not sound a heck of a lot like the original tune or whatever it is we're playing. I think if you're hitting the right chords at the right time, you'd get away with it, I think. That's my opinion.
And I think, for me, just because we do a lot of 80s covers, if I had to, I could get away with piano and strings. So between those two, and particularly the combo of those two, you can cover probably 2/3 of the stuff and it'll sound acceptable. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's true what you say about I really don't think most of the people watching really care. As long as they can hear like a recognisable riff, obviously. I mean, I can't imagine, we play Jump, Van Halen, which is like, classic. But can you imagine that being played on an organ sound? I don't know.
No.
It would probably struggle. But the good thing is I think 99.999% of keyboards have a patch already in them called
Sawtooth or whatever.
or Jump or something like that. So you'll find it on your backup keyboard if you've got more than one.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And one other guy I'll mention is James Prime of Deacon Blue, because I've always loved Deacon Blue, and he was such a funny guy.
James is an absolute treasure. And look, I've honestly, and again, Paul, I know you weren't there for that one, but I've never laugh so much at an anecdote than his Little Richard toilet anecdote. I just nearly had chest pains from laughing. It was amazing.
I laughed too, and luckily I wasn't hosting, so I didn't have to have indecorum while I was laughing. I could just do the big, ugly face belly laugh.
And look, I do want to thank Jim again. He was amazing, and I think I may have mentioned this briefly at the end of one episode. It might have even been his episode, but he's such a funny guy in that he's one of the only guests we've had where I've done the rig tour before the actual interview. And so I turned up to the Enmore Theatre in Sydney when Deacon Blue were playing there, and the tour manager brought me backstage to his rig, and then Jim came out, and the tour manager introduced me to Jim, and Jim basically said, I would never have given you the time of day, but I saw you had Bill Payne from Little Feat on the show, and I thought, well, if he can do it, I can. And that was just what Jim was like. So, yeah, absolute treasure of a guy and an absolute pleasure to have on. So, yeah, great pick, Dewi. I'm glad you mentioned Jim.
Oh, can I have one more honourable mention as well?
Please. Yeah.
So I can't remember, because I know you've interviewed at least two guys who've played with, God, my head's gone blank.
Glenn Hughes?
Glenn Hughes, yeah. I think it was the first guy you interviewed, and I can't remember his name.
Lockie Dolly?
Sorry?
Lockie Dolly played with Glenn Hughes. He's the Australian guy. Then Mike Mangan, and then Bob Fridzema.
I think it was Bob Fridzema, because I unexpectedly went to see Glenn Hughes, and I know you've seen him recently as well, haven't you, Ian?
Yes.
In a lovely venue in Yorkshire, in the UK. And I think it was the first night of his tour last year when he was playing the whole of the Burn album, or highlights from it. And
yes,
yeah, what a fantastic gig. Because it's not normally the sort of gig I'd go to. You know, I'm not a big fan of like classic heavy rock. You know, I like a lot prog rock, but the kind of more heavier stuff. But what an amazing singer and
amazing,
an amazing keyboard player as well, you know, and I know you've got
Bob.
a few dotted around the world, you know, it seems.
He does. So again, a little bit of an anecdote there. So obviously, for those that do watch most things we do, we've done a rig tour with Mike Mangan when he came with Glenn on the Australian tour. So that was a couple of months ago. And obviously I went to that gig and had the bizarre experience of Lockie Dolly in the audience standing about a metre from me. I didn't annoy Lockie on the night, but standing a metre from me watching Mike play keyboards for Glenn Hughes, and which it had been a scheduling thing. There was no, Lockie has still got a great relationship with Glenn and so on. But basically, two of those three keyboard players in the one spot at the one time. Yeah, so Glenn's got an amazing voice. For a guy in his 70s, his voice is incredible.
I can't believe how good a singer he is still. He's a great singer.
And you mentioned a bit, Paul, about things going wrong. On that night, he had enormous, really existential problems with his in-ear monitors, to the point that he stopped the show, I think, 3 times and said, I'm really sorry, but I can't work with these. And he basically pulled them out in disgust, in a nice way, and did the whole show, even though he couldn't hear himself sing.
Wow.
And still nailed it. So it was amazing. So no, thanks, Dewi. They're wonderful call-outs. So, yeah, much appreciated. For what it's worth, which is not much because I'm the guy that edits these things, but the highlights for me, Larry Mullins, I've mentioned, just Larry's perspective on Iggy Pop and Nick Cave, let alone everything else. The territory he covered in those two parts was incredible. Even his Desert Island discs are worth the price of admission alone. But just the story, even if you're not an Iggy Pop or Nick Cave fan, do listen particularly to part 1 of Larry talking about how he essentially, and he admits this himself, stalked Iggy Pop around a whole state in the US, and then that paid off 2 years later to him joining his band as a drummer. And for those in Australia and the UK, Nick Cave is obviously a very prominent figure and very well revered as a musician. So, yeah, Larry's amazing. It's not just the recency factor because it was only a couple of episodes ago, but I spent a long time trying to get Jim Moginie to come on the show. So Jim is obviously the keyboard player in Midnight Oil, again for Australians, but I know in the US and UK and Europe, or pretty much everywhere, Midnight Oil are known and very well respected. So Jim came on and had some amazing insights. A very humble, wonderful guy who happens to live locally to me, and I'm going to see him do a really intimate gig at an art gallery in a couple of weeks, and I cannot wait. And Jim and I are going to sort of catch up briefly there as well.
I just heard him interviewed 2 days ago live on ABC Radio, David.
Yeah.
I know you're a big fan, so I've just sent you the link to it to check out.
Cool.
Yeah, I heard it was really good. You'll love it.
Yeah, he's certainly in a media frenzy at the moment because he's got a new album out, which again is superb. So yeah, Jim was an absolute star. I'll pull the curtain back once more there, and I won't mention names, but I have a friend that knows Jim quite well. Probably 2 years ago, I said, would you mind asking if it's not too much of a hassle to ask Jim whether he'd be interested in coming on the podcast? Jim's response was no, not because he thought he was too important for it, but because he didn't think he was a good enough keyboard player to come on the show. So that's the sort of guy he is, and Jim's just amazing. So yeah, that was definitely a highlight. Doug Petty, you've already mentioned, Dewi, so he was wonderful to speak with, and I just love seeing how Tears for Fears are such a tour de force again and touring around, and I'm hoping they get to Australia. That'd be great. The 80s tragic in me was only one of many reasons. Having Mick Michaeli from Europe on the show was just, really, really cool. Lovely, lovely guy. And I just love the fact that he even called out, he still to this day loves playing the Final Countdown. All right, it's there. They have so much more music in their catalogue. They've diversified. They're an amazing band because at the end of the day, it's not our song anymore. It's the audience's song. And yeah, just an amazing guy. So that was a highlight. And last but definitely not least for me is Franz Nicolay, who plays keyboards with the Hold Steady. I've loved the Hold Steady for years. Franz is an accomplished author. For those out there that love music-related books, he released a book a couple of months back called Band People, which he alludes to in our interview, which is basically a year ago now, the interview. Just amazing guy, and caught up with him for a rig tour again earlier this year. So just, yeah, but they were mine. Last call for any honourable mentions, otherwise I'm going to wrap that bit up. And given that we're nearly at an hour, I think that's probably reasonable.
Yeah, well, that was a good list there. Good list, David. You too, Dewi. Some really good call-outs there, and it's exciting that we still have guests that we have queued up to release and put into. Like, we've got a few in the can, haven't we, Dave? We've got a few. We
have. So yeah, look, that's a beautiful segue, and we didn't even plan it that way. Thankful to what's happening next year. So next year, I don't have any particularly earth-shattering announcements, but next year we're going to continue to bring you some great guests, both known and not so well known. I think I've got 3 or 4 in the can at the moment, with a couple more scheduled in. We've got a few irons in the fire with some wonderful artists. Just one little anecdote. There's an artist coming out to Australia next year that, particularly in the UK, and I'll tell you offline, Dewi, who it is, particularly in the UK and Australia, is quite well known as a really successful both player and singer from the 1990s. He's coming out next year, and so I managed to get in touch with his PR people, and for the first time in 130 plus episodes, the PR person said, look, that's fine, he'll come on, but you can only have 20 minutes.
Oh.
Right, or 25 minutes, sorry, it was 25 minutes. He was just doing a whole day of back-to-back media interviews to promo his tour. And it's like, well, I'd rather have 25 minutes than nothing at all. So I went, yeah, that's fine. We logged on, like we are all here now on the Riverside platform. He logged in, couldn't get his video to work. Could hear him, he could hear me, chatted to him very briefly. He was stressed by the fact he couldn't get the stuff working, did the usual log off and log on again, still no go. By this time we're 10 minutes in. I went, sorry, but you had such an amazing career. I'm not going to try and cover that in 15 minutes. How about we try and reconvene? But sadly, because the way PR people work with more major artists, never heard boo since. But we shall see. We'll see if I do hear back just David, before the tour.
I know what must have really happened. You said, listen, mate, 25 minutes. Don't you know who I am? I get out, or you're out. It's as simple as that. I don't care who you are.
And no, this wasn't aimed at the artist, but you're actually right, Paul. There was a little bit of that. It's like we've had some of the most amazing artists, not because of me or you or anyone being brilliant, but just because it's a great forum for keyboard players to talk about their careers. And it's like, if you can't give me, I understand that he's doing a promo tour, and the last thing he wants to do is talk to everyone for an hour. I totally get that. But I sort of said, you're an amazing artist. Let's reconvene at a different time so we can actually dig into your career. Now, he at least feigned interest in doing that, but we shall see. So,
do you know if I was Rich, a famous keyboard, I'm guessing he's a keyboard player, but he must be a keyboard player.
He is. He's a singer and a keyboard player, and it's not Elton John, by the way.
No. I'd love to be on a podcast about keyboard players because
that's right.
Yeah. What would be a better way than spending an hour talking about keyboards?
And I certainly didn't detect any disinterest from him. It was more his PR people just wanting to get as many interviews for their client before they come out on tour to maximise their sales. Now, I'm going to see him. I bought tickets, and my wife's a fan as well. So I look forward to at least seeing him from the audience, but I'll be very surprised if he comes on the show. But anyway, that's just an interesting little anecdote. So as far as next year, I assume we'll have about another 30 episodes out during the year. We've got some irons in the fire, as Paul said. We'd love to hear from you. What really helps us improve is knowing what you like. Now, in every single show notes, so if you go to thekeyboardchronicles.com, it doesn't matter what episode you click on in the recent episodes, you will see there is a link there that's asks you for it's a link to a user survey. It's died off the last few months, so we've had quite a few people do it traditionally, but not in the last 6 to 12 months. It really does help us know what you would like more or less of. It does ask you some demographic questions that you can choose to ignore as far as age and income and all that sort of stuff. It's just our podcast provider just asks those. It doesn't, from memory, ask you for an email address or any other way of identifying you, which is great. But yeah, just knowing what you would like more or less of is hugely helpful. But otherwise, Paul, I think you and I sort of have this tentative arrangement to turn up at NAMM in 2026. We were originally going to do it in 2025, but finances defeated me. And just, I know with your band being so busy, we just put it in the too hard basket. But I think we're aiming for January 2026.
Yeah, it's probably worked out well that we didn't go when I look at what I've got committed to now.
Yes.
But we are keen to do it. So, yeah, mate, I think that'd be fantastic. And David and I have this idea we might head over to NAMM and try and do some live interviews with some of our previous guests and maybe get a couple of new guests in a headlock before they even realise it and talk to them. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. So that's kind of on our plan, plus the things we've been doing. So interviewing great keyboard players, you may have heard of them, you may not have, but they're all notable in some way or another. And we're committed to looking after our patrons as well, as David said before.
And that's what I mean. I feel really bad always talking about the cost of this thing, but this obviously isn't a profitable exercise. So our patrons, we hugely supported. Dewi is one of those. Dewi, I know I've thanked you many times, and I know you don't expect it, but
worth every penny.
Thank you. We do love and so patrons every single episode get as I'm editing, I'll basically find a really interesting snippet of somewhere between 1 and 3 minutes, and I'll post it in the Patreon page. So it can be anywhere between 24 hours to a week before anyone else gets to see it. This extra episode will be going to our patrons probably for at least 7 days, depending on how long it takes me to edit it. Maybe it might only be a few days before the rest of the world see it. And obviously patrons get a heads up on future guests. So some of the things I've just been a little bit mysterious about, patrons would already be aware of. And they are obviously very welcome to ask questions and so on of guests once I've given the flag that they're coming on.
Yeah, please. So, if you are a patron and you know of a guest that's coming up and you think, I hope Paul and David asked them this. Well, you tell us and we'll do it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, please. And it's around $3 a month, so it's pretty lo-fi, not low value. It's not costly. That's the word I was after. It's 11:10 p.m. at night here. I'm getting tired. So no, thank you for that. And the other thing, obviously, to keep afloat is we do sell merchandise on both Spreadshop and Redbubble. And thanks to those that have bought some stuff out. Yeah, like that T-shirt. And there are some actual non-keyboard Chronicles merchandise on there. So it's more for keyboard players rather than just promoting us. So, because obviously, you don't want to just be promoting a podcast. So
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, well, you do, but you know what I mean. So
One
now,
of my New Year's resolutions is to buy some merchandise. Sorry,
you're the last person I expect. You're already supporting, so never feel pressured. And the wonderful Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew has bought much merchandise over the last couple of years, and I've said the same to her. It is not expected, given your wonderful support. Now, speaking of wonderful support, I just want to do a quick shout out, firstly to you, Paul, for your support during the year. I know you don't think so, but I couldn't have done it without you. And whether it's your actual appearance on the shows or our chats in between, and obviously got to see your good-looking face in the flesh once. That's only a few weeks back. It wasn't about a month ago.
I know. It was very exciting for me. Thank you, David, and it's always a privilege to hang out with you and do this. And I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it again. David does all the work. I just turn up sometimes and stutter my way through a couple of questions, and hope I don't sound like too much of an idiot. And it's so much fun. And like you were saying earlier, Dewi, it's just nice to be listening to other keyboard players and what they're interested in doing. And it's a privilege. So, David, thank you for letting me be part of your very cool project, mate.
Pleasure is all mine. And the other one who I want to thank is Mr. Joe Mascara. So for those that listen or watch regularly, we make jokes at the very end, after our interview in the outro, when most people have turned off. We know that Joe still listens, and I know Joe will probably listen to this eventually. Joe stepped in, and I apologise, Joe. Was it once or twice this year? Joe has been on the show, I'm going to say 3 times. And Joe, that's not just I've forgotten you. I forget the stats on any show, as I've demonstrated by not knowing when Paul was or wasn't on a show. But I mean, Joe was responsible for the Bill Payne interview, and Joe jumped in a couple of times over the past 12 months too, and it was brilliant having him. So we had. I'm not going to attempt to remember the guests now, just like I can't remember when you were on, Paul.
Is it Joe that's the prog rock expert?
No, that was Matt, who's a good friend of Paul's as well. Yeah. So no, Joe's from Texas in the US, and has joined us for a number of shows. And Joe's a member of the musicplayer.com forum.
Oh, yeah.
So and I've met Joe at NAMM in 2020, which was a highlight as well. So thank you, Joe. Otherwise, and Dewi, thank you for joining us this time. And as I've alluded to too, we'll have an interview immediately after this as part of this. Dewi's did some amazing work writing a book on rock keyboards, and you'll hear more about that directly after this. So, yeah, thank you, sir. Much appreciated, and we look forward to it. It sounds like Paul's going to lob on your doorstep for a month and not refuse to leave. So you've been warned.
I'm stuck there here. I'm never leaving. I'm going to admire the beautiful coastline and the mountains and hear the wonderful singing that I'm told all Welsh people do. I can't wait.
That's right.
Yeah, we're very famous for our singing, yeah. Yeah.
And in the edits, I'm going to do your wonderful pronunciation of your hometown. I'm going to loop it about 6 times, so it's even 6 times longer. So no, thank you, Dewi, and most importantly, thank you to all out there that listen. You literally number in the thousands, and we hugely appreciate it. We've talked briefly before, but you come from all parts of the world. Funnily enough, only a small percentage of our listeners are from Australia, probably about 20%, and the rest coming from the US, Canada, UK, South America, and other parts of Europe as well, and obviously New Zealand. Never forget our New Zealand friends. So, yeah, for these coarse accents that we have, Paul, we have a lot of listeners from around the world.
I'll tell you what, if our American listeners heard me talk when I'm not on the podcast, they would be horrified, because I'm very, very hard to understand.
Yes.
Hard to understand anyway. I get that, but I have a very, very thick Australian accent. I talk way too quickly, and when I'm relaxed, I think only other Australians can understand me. So thank you to all our international guests for putting up with my voice.
Can I just say, I mean, your accents is part of the appeal to me. I mean, I love hearing back the key, but I just love you guys, and I hope you please don't stop, because I just love this podcast so much, and
No, thank you, Dewi.
Yeah.
Very kind. Very kind.
And yeah, but yeah, off recording, Paul does sound more like Crocodile. Hey, go mate, what's going on?
That is exactly how I talk.
Get out of here. So, yeah, no, thank you all out there for listening. We'll be back in I said, as Paul mentioned, we've got a few in the can. So we'll be back in a few weeks. And in the meantime, if you're watching this before the end of the year, have a great end of 2024 and a brilliant 2025. And we'll talk to you. Well, we won't talk to you, but you'll listen to us very, very soon. So, and I'm really pleased to have a guest co-host with me, Mr. Dewi Evans. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No, my pleasure. So those that are dedicated and listen to the podcast and stick it through to the end, so Joe Mascara, I'm looking at you in particular, Dewi's very kindly been a supporter of the podcast for quite a period of time, and we hugely appreciate that. And so I reached out to Dewi because he has a really interesting history as a musician and an author related to the topic we all like of keyboards. So, Dewi, I thought I might get you to just initially start with doing a bit of a potted history of, just probably a shortened version of what we do on the podcast, your life in music as far as your professional years in particular.
Yeah. So professionally, yeah. I mean, I won't go way back to when I was a child. I mean, it's quite a familiar story, My mum had a piano, started picking out tunes on the piano, and then she sent me to piano lessons. But I was always more interested in coming up with my own little tunes rather than learning, the standard classical repertoire. So, but skipping forward a bit, I dabbled a bit with playing with bands in school. I played with a band, and then I actually did some solo gigs just after I left school when I was doing a college course. I was known as the Casio Kid because, for obvious reasons, I had a very basic Casio keyboard, and I did some very basic recordings around about that time. Very kind of synth pop was big. It was the early 80s, so I was very influenced by Depeche Mode and OMD and bands like that, Human League. And that kind of was reflected in the kind of stuff I was doing. But then fast forward, I then went on to do a degree, not in music, in graphic design in Liverpool. And then music was very much on the back burner then. I then moved to London to do, with the intention of trying to find a job in advertising, actually. That was my speciality when I did my design degree, advertising design. That didn't work out, but I secretly kind of had that itch that hadn't been scratched very much anyway, to play music, to try and, join a band and try and maybe not make a living, but just kind of see what happened, So I guess that's kind of when I started kind of professionally. I managed to borrow some money from my brother to buy my first kind of proper synth, if you like, which again was a Casio. It was a Casio, one of the early CZ synths, CZ3000. And once I had that, I mean, it's not the best synth on the market. It wasn't a DX7 or anything like that, but it did sound good, and it sounded a lot better than what I'd been used to using. So I decided to put an advert in the Melody Maker. I don't know if you're familiar with the Melody Maker. It was quite a big music paper in the UK.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like NME and Melody Maker were the big two, weren't they?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's no longer going, as a lot of music papers aren't. But it had a very kind of comprehensive classified section, and that was kind of the way bands would find, or musicians would find bands to work with, and vice versa. So I just placed a very small ad in that paper. Literally, you had to pay by the word. So, and I was very short of money at that time. So it was, keyboard player, seeks band, and then I think I mentioned 3 influences: Level 42, TFF, because that was a way of saving 2 words. If I just put TFF, Tears for Fears, and Go West, I think, was the other one. And I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. I didn't have transport. All I had was the keyboard and me, and a bit of musical ability, I like to think. And I had a few replies, one of which one guy I ended up working with, he was a German called Hans, really nice German guy. And he had his own a lot more professional than I had, quite a decent recording sort of set up in his house. He had a DX7, which was nice, and a Roland MSQ sequencer, sort of very basic sequencer, and an 8-track. And so I learned a lot by working with him over the years, and a couple of other bands that I kind of tried out with, and it didn't kind of quite work out. But so I stuck with Hans. But also a few weeks after I placed the ad, this is where the book story starts, which is, guess what we're talking about today. I had a call from this publisher called Salamander Books. They were quite a big publisher in London. They did a lot of kind of instructional books. So they did a lot of cookery books and needlework and that kind of thing. Very factual based. And they were nice, I later got to see, a lot of their products, and they're really nicely put together and everything. And this guy just phoned me up out of the blue from Salamander, and he said, we're thinking of producing this instructional book, showing people how to play keyboards. And what we want to do is we want to produce a few dummy pages to take to the Frankfurt Book Fair. And I since found out that the Frankfurt Book Fair is a very big deal in the world of publishing.
It is, yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of that, but so initially they just wanted to take photographs of my hands playing a keyboard. They said, would you be interested in doing this? I think they offered me maybe £200. And of course I jumped at it, because, I needed the money. So I went down to the photographic studio somewhere in London, and they actually made up my hands. They put makeup on my hands. And I took my keyboard along as well, and they kind of photographed me playing a few chords and stuff and whatever. A couple of hours work, and that was it. And they said, thank you very much. We'll send you a check, Probably about a month later, they got in touch again, and they said, the guy we had in mind to do... I think we haven't managed to find anybody to write some text for these dummy pages. Would you be interested in just writing anything and anything that comes to mind about keyboard playing, just so we've got something to show at this book fair? And I kind of thought, well, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. But I must say, I'm not a writer, and I've never written before in my life. But I'll happily give it a go. So I just kind of wrote a few kind of basics that I remembered from piano lessons, and just stuff about chords and whatever, scales. I just wrote a couple of pages, sent it in, and they said, yeah, that's great, we'll use that. He said, nobody's going to read it. It's really just to kind of so we can produce these dummy pages. Off they went to the Frankfurt Book Fair, seemed to generate quite a bit of interest, so I was told. And then probably, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months passed, and they got in touch with me again and said, so we did have this guy lined up to write this section of the book, because what they were planning was they were going to have like a theory section, how to play. They were going to have like a buyer's guide, so you could kind of get an idea of all the synthesizers were on the market at the time, and kind of like reviews of different keyboards. And then there was a section about the music business as well. So it's quite a comprehensive book, wasn't just necessarily geared on showing you how to play the keyboards. It was, showing you how to kind of learn how to play the keyboards and then form a band, what to buy, how to kind of make it in the music business kind of thing. This is the mid-'80s, by the way.
And I'm fascinated, Dewey. So there's 3 brilliant topics we could explore there. We probably don't have time to explore them all, but I'm fascinated by what the buyer's guide. So I assume what was it? Do you remember what it was suggesting? And sorry, just for our viewers and listeners, the actual book is called Play Rock Keyboard.
Yeah.
And just before we recorded, Dewi and I were looking, I had a look, and it's still available on Amazon. And yeah, there it is. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So, and I'm planning on picking up a copy because I just think as a bit of a time capsule, it'd be amazing. So what were some of the keyboards it was suggesting in the buyer's guide?
Okay, so in the buyer's guide, we've got a few kind of basic Casio. I think there were different price ranges.
Yeah.
There's a nice picture there of an emulator too, I think, and a DX7
nice.
and a PPG Wave.
What were the Casios?
So they were. Hang on a minute. Let me just get that in camera. So we had the CT360.
Oh, yeah.
CT630, and then various other models that they mentioned.
Yeah.
But then they kind of go a little bit more. There was quite a lot of Casios. They must have known who I was in my previous life.
Stuff like that. Was it the
CZ101
there? Yeah, so CZ101, yeah.
Going up a little bit more pricey. CZ1000. Oh, we've got the Oscar. The OSC Oscar. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. I'd forgotten about the Oscar, yeah.
What else? DX27, Yamaha.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The Roland Alpha Juno 2.
Nice.
Another 80s kind of analog synth, but with a digital interface, if I remember right. So it's a bit like a DX7 crossed with an analog sound. S10 sampler.
Oh, that's right.
Early Roland sampler.
No, I'm going to have to pick up one of these. Aside from the keyboard magazines, this is the stuff people just love browsing through.
And there you've got the DX7, and you've got a Super Jupiter there.
Oh, yeah,
so
the
we
rack.
did talk about modules. Super JX, of course, was a lovely synthesizer.
Yeah. And when that came out, Dewi, what was the response? I mean, again, people were lapping stuff up like this, particularly in the 80s, and there was really only Keyboard Magazine. I assume Electronic Musician might have been around then. And in the UK, Future Music, was that around in the 80s?
It was, yeah. Yep. So there was, we had Sound on Sound. I think Sound on Sound started 1985, if I remember rightly. There was another really good magazine called Music Technology, which was around certainly probably until the early to mid 90s. So yeah, there was loads of stuff. It was a very exciting time to be, a keyboard player and starting out as I was, because, every week some great new synth or sampler would come out. What it seemed, and I couldn't afford them obviously, but it was nice to kind of dream, and one good thing that did come out of the book, I should go on to say actually, so just to try and finish off the story of the book, so they had somebody in mind. This guy obviously dropped out, and they said, would you be interested in writing it? Of course, it was like, oh my God, am I up to this? I feel like I'm, real imposter syndrome, because I'd never written before. But of course, what do you do in a situation like that? You just say yes, don't you? And then very fortunately, they put me together with this really nice guy called Phil McNeil. He'd had a lot of experience of working in writing for music magazines, and he was editing the book. He was kind of like the overall kind of keeping an eye on everybody basically. Yeah. And he really helped me out. He would take my handwritten, this is the days before word processors even, my handwritten notes, and he would kind of make them into something readable. And I actually ended up using my design skills as well, because I kind of came up with a kind of simplified way of, how to play keyboards, but it's very graphics orientated, if you look, I can show you some examples of, some of the graphics that I came up with, and so quite colourful and quite clear, and
I mean, when you say, how did you come up with them? Because they're quite good. So did you draw them and they typeset them, or not typeset them, but or you were doing them on computer?
So this was even, I mean, Apple Macs were just starting to be used.
That's right.
In the design world. You know, to be honest, I did my degree at just the wrong time because, you know, when I was learning how to hand typeset, you know, which is like something from the Arc now, you know. So I think the Apple Mac came out in '84, and of course that revolutionized not just, you know, music eventually, but design as well, you know. And I missed out on all that. So I basically had very kind of rough designs that I kind of hand drew, and they had a designer obviously for the book, and he would take those designs and adapt them, and you know, did a great job. So in a way, I kind of, not only did I write it, I kind of almost designed a lot of it as well. So it was a real, you know, thrown in a deep end situation.
And at that stage, Dewey, you were actually playing in bands, and I know your bio, you've done a lot of really interesting, particularly in the electronic music genre, which is, you know, an area that I love as well. Yeah, so you were sort of exposed to all the technology that you're writing about and actually doing some of the stuff yourself. So, I mean, was it an exciting time for you as a musician at that time?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing this book did enable me to do was it kind of got me off the dole. Do you call it the dole in Australia? You know, unemployment benefit. For a short time, anyway, I managed to stay off for 2 years, and that. But the other thing it did was it enabled me to. Because obviously I got paid quite well to do it. I thought, oh, now I'm going to buy myself a really professional synthesizer, and of course, what was coming up as I was writing was the Roland D50.
I was hoping you would say that. Yeah.
And so I was actually, I believe, one of the first people in the UK to get hold of a Roland D50, which there was this shop I used to go to in London called Future Music. It was down New Kings Road. I don't know how well people know London, but it's a shop I used to go to a lot and just kind of like hang around and, you know, probably be a nuisance. But as soon as I found out about the D50, I thought, right, that's the one I'm going to go for, you know. And I put down my deposit, you know, because I had some money, you know, from the book already. You know, I got paid in installments, and it was, you know, a dream come true to actually get my hands on one. And I did actually sell it in the end, but you know, it's one of my biggest regrets as a keyboard player, selling that keyboard.
Yeah. Do you remember how much it cost at the time?
I believe, if I remember right, I think it was about £1,500
Yeah, so doing the conversions, that's roughly 3,000 Australian. So it'd be roughly $1,500 to $1,600. Yeah, okay, that's a lot of money, particularly that's a lot of money. Yeah,
it was. Yeah. But I just knew, you know, if I'm going to do this seriously, I needed a professional quality synth, and it was very, you know, the hype around it at the time was. You know, it was like a really big news because it was just something so different. You know, the DX7 had been like ruling the roost up, and it's funny to think now, but the DX7 had only been out for about maybe 4 years maximum.
Yeah,
and yet,
absolutely.
You know, it seemed
of our generation, Dewi, who had the pleasure, and I only did for a couple of days in about 1988. Did I get my hands on a D50, but it was life-changing as far as you said, the quality of the sound, even compared to the DX7, it was just on another whole plane. So sadly, we've lost Dewi. A huge thanks to him, and I will post a link to the Amazon link to Play Rock keyboards. So you're talking about buying something from the 80s. It is not cheap, and Dewi obviously doesn't get any benefit from that. But it could be money very well spent if you're into memorabilia, and I think I'm about to jump off and do just that. Thank you, and keep on playing.